All right, today we're going to jump into this really fascinating ancient story that explores that razor-thin line between destiny and decision, between what is foreseen and what we ultimately choose. It's all about power, ambition, and honestly, a prophecy that will bend your mind a little bit.
And really, the whole thing hangs on this central paradox. It just sounds impossible, right? I mean, how can both of these things be true at the exact same time? Well, that's the mystery we're going to try and unravel here. And to really get it, we actually have to go back a generation.
So believe it or not, our story doesn't start where you think. It actually begins a generation earlier. It's all about this mission, you see, that was passed from one great prophet, Elijah, to his successor, Elisha. And you've got to understand, this isn't just some random meeting. Nope. This is the fulfillment of a divine plan that's been in the works for a long, long time.
Okay, so here's the deal. God gave Elijah 3 very specific jobs to do, but he only got one of them done, calling Elisha. That means the other 2, anointing a new king in Syria and a new king in Israel, yeah, those were left hanging. So this inheritance, this kind of heavy sense of destiny, it all lands squarely on Elisha's shoulders now.
And so what does Elisha do? He travels right into foreign territory, to Damascus, which is the heart of Syrian power. The stage is totally set. It's time for the first of these unfinished missions to finally be carried out.
Okay, and this is where things get really interesting, because it's right there in Damascus that Elisha has this super dramatic encounter with this ambitious official, a guy named Hazael. And let me tell you, this one meeting is going to change the course of history.
So here's the setup. The king of Syria, Ben-Hadad, he's sick. And what's interesting is he's actually had run-ins with Elisha before. So he's come to respect his power. So what does he do? He sends his most trusted guy, Hazael, and get this, loaded up with 40 camel loads of gifts to go find this foreign prophet.
And the king's question is, well, it's simple, it's direct, it's something anyone would ask. It's literally a matter of life and death. Am I going to recover from this illness?
So the answer Elisha gives is a total paradox. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at first. He tells Hazael, go tell the king the good news. You're going to recover. But then he turns right to Hazael and says, but the Lord has revealed to me that he's actually going to die. So what's going on here? Is the prophet lying? No, not at all. You see, the illness itself isn't fatal. The king would have recovered. But something else is about to happen.
And then the scene just takes this incredibly dramatic and emotional turn. Elisha isn't just delivering a prophecy anymore. He's having a full-blown vision of the future. And what he sees, it's so horrifying, it literally brings him to tears.
I mean, try to picture this for a second. Elijah, the man of God, just locks eyes with Hazael and stares. And he holds that gaze for so long that Hazael starts to get really uncomfortable, embarrassed. And then Elijah, while looking right at this guy, just starts weeping uncontrollably.
So of course Hazael is like, why are you crying? And Elisha just lays it all out, this terrible vision he's seeing. He sees all the brutal, awful things that Hazael is going to do to Elisha's own people, Israel. He's basically seeing the future king of Syria as a butcher who's about to unleash just unimaginable violence. Okay, now listen. Listen very carefully to how Hazael responds to this, because this is the absolute key to understanding his character. He says, how could your servant, a mere dog, accomplish such a feat?
Did you catch that? The crucial thing here is what he doesn't say. He doesn't react with horror. He doesn't go, oh my gosh, how could I ever do such an evil thing? No. He hears this prophecy of slaughter and conquest and calls it a feat, like a great accomplishment. His only question is how someone as lowly as him, a mere dog in his own words, could pull off something so grand. Right there, his ambition is just laid completely bare.
And this right here brings us to the heart of the whole story. Hazael is now standing at a crossroads. He's holding 2 pieces of information, and they're forcing him to make a really critical choice.
And look, Hazael totally gets it. Elisha has told him 2 things. 1, you're going to be king. And 2, the current king, left to his own devices, is going to get better. So for a guy as ambitious as Hazael, the conclusion is pretty simple, isn't it? If he wants that throne, he can't just sit around and wait for nature to take its course.
You know, there's a really powerful analogy for this kind of thing. Think about the age of sail. A ship couldn't just leave port whenever it felt like it, right? It had to wait for the tide to go out. If you missed that window, you were stuck there for hours. The real skill was sensing that perfect moment to act and letting the tide, not just your own frantic rowing, carry you out to sea. And that just perfectly illustrates the two paths that are sitting right in front of Hazael. On one hand, there's the path of patience, trusting that God has a plan and a way to make the prophecy happen in His own time. Or there's the path of ambition, taking matters into your own hands to force the outcome you want right now.
So, which path does he choose? This is where we finally see the resolution to that impossible prophecy, and we get to explore this really complex relationship between what God knows is going to happen and what we, as humans, are responsible for.
Well, Hazael chooses the path of ambition. Big surprise, right? He goes back to King Ben-Hadad, and he delivers the first part of the message, just like he was told. The good news, you will recover. And then, the very next day, he takes a thick cloth, soaks it in water, and smothers the king to death in his own bed. And just like that, both parts of the prophecy came true. The king would have recovered from the illness, but he died by Hazael's hand.
And this is that fine line we were talking about right at the very beginning. Elisha, speaking for God, foresaw exactly what Hazael was going to do. He saw the future. But, and this is so crucial, he did not command it. There is a massive difference between knowing what's going to happen and making it happen.
This just illustrates that balance perfectly, doesn't it? God knew Hazael's character. He knew all about his ruthless ambition. He knew the choice he was going to make the second he was presented with this opportunity. But the responsibility for that choice, the decision to commit murder, that rests 100% with Hazael. It shows how God can use the free and even the evil choices of people to accomplish his larger plans, without ever being the one who causes their sin.
And that leaves us with a really timeless and deeply personal question. Because this ancient story, it isn't just about kings and prophets from thousands of years ago. It's really about all of us, today. When you see an opportunity, when you feel that little pull of your own destiny, how do you tell the difference between seizing a God-given moment and just forcing your own ambition? How do you know when to act and when it's time to just wait for the tide?